My name is Darren, and I'm a lifelong waterfowl hunter from southeast Missouri. I've been hunting ducks since I was a teenager. These days, I work a regular job during the week and try to squeeze my hunting into the short season we get every winter. I've hunted a lot of public ground over the years, but Mingo National Wildlife Refuge was always the one I treated with a little extra respect. It's beautiful, but it's also big, wet, and unforgiving when the weather and the water both decide to turn on you. The morning this happened, it was late November, cold enough that every puddle in town had a thin skim of ice on it. The forecast said low 20s before sunrise and not much warmer after, with a light north wind. That's good duck weather if you're dressed for it and careful. My son and I had drawn a flooded timber spot through the morning draw, and he was excited. His name is Tyler. He was 16 at the time, old enough to carry his own gun and gear, but still young enough to think nothing bad could really happen, as long as his dad was there. We pulled into the hunter check station long before legal shooting light. There were already trucks in the lot, guys standing around in waders and heavy jackets, blowing on coffee and waiting for their numbers to get called. It was the usual scene: tired jokes, talk about birds seen the day before, complaints about work and wives, and everybody pretending they weren't watching the clock. I signed us in, confirmed our pool assignment, and we headed back to the truck to gear up. We were hunting with normal duck guns, nothing fancy. I carried a 12-gauge pump I've had for years, the same one I used to teach Tyler on clays. He had a 20-gauge he'd saved up for and bought the year before. Both of us were shooting factory steel loads, 3-inch shells, number 2s. Refuge rules meant non-toxic shot only, so there was no lead in our bags. That ammo is fine for mallards and wood ducks at sane ranges, but it's not meant for anything bigger. Between us, we had maybe a dozen extra shells in our pockets. Enough for a good morning, not enough for a war. We wore chest waders, fleece underneath, and heavy jackets over the top. I'd insisted on hand warmers, extra gloves, and a dry pair of socks in the truck for after the hunt. The older I get, the more I care about staying warm, and the less I care about looking tough. Tyler rolled his eyes at some of it, but he packed what I told him to pack. I also made sure he had a headlamp with fresh batteries. Falling in flooded timber in the dark is a good way to ruin a hunt or worse. Our draw spot was a short drive from the check station. Outside, the cold hit us as soon as we opened the doors. The air had that sharp feel to it, like it wanted to climb down your collar. You could smell water and mud and the faint sour rot of leaves sitting under it all. We loaded our guns at the truck, chambers empty, safeties on, and shouldered our gear. I carried the decoy bag, about a dozen mallard floaters, and a couple of wood duck decoys. Tyler had the jerk rig and the game strap. We both had small day packs with snacks and whatever junk we always seemed to accumulate. The walk-in wasn't far, maybe a few hundred yards on a marked path before the trail dipped into water. The ground was frozen on top and soft underneath, so every step crunched and then gave. Somewhere off to our left, another group's lights bobbed through the trees. You can't see much in that pre-dawn gray, but you can always hear other people moving in waders. Nothing else sounds quite like it. When the trail met water, we stopped and turned off the lamps for a minute. I like to let my eyes adjust and get a feel for the place. In the dim light, you could make out the dark trunks of cypress and oaks standing in shin to knee-deep water, with small pockets of more open water scattered between the trees. The wind pushed little ripples across the surface. Every once in a while, a wood duck squealed somewhere out in the dark. That sound always makes me feel like a kid again. "All right," I said, keeping my voice low. "Stay behind me. Pick your feet up. If you feel a stump, feel around it before you move." "I know, Dad," Tyler said. "I remember. I know you remember. I'm reminding you anyway." He huffed, but he grinned. I could see it even in the half-light. We eased into the flooded timber. The water came up over our boots and against our waders in a slow, cold push. Even with decent gear, you feel that temperature difference immediately. It wasn't deep, but a misstep onto a submerged log or into a hole can still dump you. I moved slowly and carefully, using the butt of my shotgun as a feeler in front of me when the bottom felt suspicious. Our assigned spot wasn't marked by a blind, just a general area. I'd hunted enough timber to know what I liked. a small open pocket ringed by trees, not too deep, with some overhead canopy but enough sky to see birds dropping in. After a few minutes of waiting, we found a little opening that looked right. There were a few old decoy lines hanging from branches, so I figured other folks liked it too. "This'll do," I said. "We'll set up here." We put our guns up in the crooks of trees where they wouldn't fall, muzzles pointed safe and clear. Then I shrugged out of the decoy bag and started tossing floats into the water, spacing them in a loose U with the open end downwind. Tyler set the jerk rig in the middle, weight on the bottom, and lined up to a couple of decoys. In still water like that, a jerk string is worth more than a fancy call half the time. Ducks like movement more than they like perfect paint. When the spread was out, we each picked a tree to lean against. I checked my watch. We had a few minutes until legal shooting light. You're not supposed to fire early on the refuge, and most folks take that pretty seriously. The ticket alone is bad enough, and nobody wants to be the guy who screws it up for everyone else. "You good?" I asked. Tyler nodded. "Yeah, I'm freezing, but yeah. That's duck hunting," I said. "If you're comfortable, you're probably not on the ducks." He snorted softly. We both settled in. From where we stood, we had decent shooting lanes. A small gap opened up to our front, where birds could drop in straight over the decoys. To the right, there was a narrow slot between two larger trunks, where I figured wood ducks might rocket through. Tyler covered more of the left side, where the timber thinned out toward a slightly bigger pocket of water. We talked a little, but not much. Mostly, we just listened. You can hear a lot if you're patient. The soft drip of water off branches, the quiet slap of a small wave hitting a trunk, wings whispering high above you. Once or twice, I thought I heard distant voices from another group, then nothing. I remember feeling calm. It was just another cold morning in the timber with my kid. The worst I expected that day was maybe a dunked wader or a skunked hunt. Looking back, that normal feeling is what stands out the most. There was nothing about that first half hour that told me we were about to run into something I still have trouble naming out loud. At legal light, I checked my watch again and gave Tyler a nod. "We're on," I said. "Safety off if you see wings. Pick a bird. Don't flock shoot." "Yes, sir," he said. We both clicked our safeties off and waited for the first ducks to show. Beat 2. We heard the first ducks before we saw them. Wings whistled low and fast through the trees to our right, and a pair of wood ducks came rocketing through the slot I'd been watching. I shouldered and fired once on instinct. The drake folded and splashed down just past the edge of the decoys. Tyler swung late and fired behind the hen. His shot tore up water, and that was it. A few minutes later, a small group of mallards started working us. I gave them a couple of soft quacks and let the jerk rig do the rest. They circled once, then dropped into the hole the way they're supposed to when everything goes right. Tyler picked a bird and fired. The hen jerked, lost height, and sailed off left through the trees instead of crashing in front of us. I saw the cripple hit the water somewhere back in the darker timber. I shot at a drake on my side and flat out missed. Tyler pointed out where his bird had gone down and started easing that way. I stopped him. I usually let the spot settle for a minute. In thick cover, rushing a cripple usually just pushes it farther. I stood there listening for thrashing or splashing and heard nothing out of the ordinary. After a bit, I figured the bird was either dead or hunkered tight and decided we'd better go recover it. I sent Tyler after it, but warned him he was to stay where I could see him and not go past a particular split-trunk tree that marked a line in the timber. If he couldn't find the duck inside that bubble, we'd loop around later. He nodded and started wading off to the left, lifting his feet like I'd taught him and feeling for stumps. The water was a little deeper there, mid-thigh on him. I stayed by my tree, partly to watch the decoys, and partly to keep one of us stable and dry in case he fell in. At first, I could see him clearly. Then the trees thickened, and he turned into more of a silhouette and a faint halo where his headlamp still threw a little light. That was when I heard another noise. At first, it sounded like another hunter splashing through the timber somewhere behind us. Heavy steps in the water, not right on top of us, but close enough that I noticed. On public ground, you get used to people wandering too close. So my first thought was just that someone had misjudged where our spot ended. The rhythm was wrong, though. It wasn't that steady, awkward slog you hear from a guy in waders. It picked up and slowed down in strange bursts. A couple of steps hit harder, like something much heavier than a man dropping into a deeper pocket and then driving back up. I yelled for Tyler to hold up and stop where he was. He turned back toward me, but I was already more focused on the sound than on him. The noises stopped. For a few seconds, everything went still except for a distant wood duck squeal and the quiet slap of water against trunks where the wind pushed it. I slid the safety off, purely on instinct, and turned slowly, trying to pick out movement between the trees. The light was coming up, but it was still that flat gray that makes everything the same color. After a few moments, I caught a shape off to my right, back toward the direction of the trail we'd used coming in. It was tall, too tall and rather broad through the shoulders. For a moment, my brain tried to file it as a big man in dark gear, maybe in a long parka with the hood up. Then it stepped from behind one trunk to another and straightened more as it did, and more details came into focus. It was standing on two legs, but the legs weren't right. The lower sections bent back visibly, like a dog's, and the arms looked oversized. Based on my height estimate for the thing, between 7 and 8 feet, I guessed that the arms were almost as long as I was tall, and half as thick. I am no small guy. I stand at 5 feet 11 and weigh about 200 pounds. Whatever or whoever it was, they were absolutely massive. The head had no hat or hood, just an elongated but blunt shape, broad through the muzzle and jaw, thick rather than delicate, with ears up on top instead of on the sides where a human's would be. I was certain it wasn't a bear. The arms and lower legs were a total mismatch. I didn't have a damn clue what I was looking at. At that distance, about 30 yards, my cheap headlight was nowhere near strong enough to reach it. Tyler was still off to my left, maybe 40 yards away and angling deeper. From his angle, a big tree blocked his view of the thing. I called him back toward me and told him to move slowly. I kept my voice as flat as I could manage, but there must have been something in the tone, because he started turning without arguing. Raising my voice that second time was what changed it. The strange being shifted and turned its head toward me. One eye caught just enough light to flash, not glowing on its own, just reflecting the light like any predator's would. Then it dropped. 1 second, it stood upright behind the tree. The next, it went down on all fours and disappeared into the trunks. The sound of it moving changed immediately. The heavy, irregular steps turned into a low, fast scramble. There's a difference between a man walking through water and a dog running through it. This was more like the second one, only much heavier. I told Tyler to move toward me and not run, just keep coming. At the same time, I started toward him, forcing myself to keep my own steps smooth. The water felt like it had climbed up inside my waders. The bottom felt softer. I had to fight the urge to rush and potentially fall. Something crashed in the water behind me to the right, then again ahead of me to the left a few moments later. That part still bothers me. It felt like it was in two places at once, but I know it wasn't. It was just moving faster than my head could track. I saw it again between two trees, closer to Tyler this time. It was low now, still running on 4 limbs. The front ones looked more like arms than legs, long and muscled, ending in hands or paws big enough to wrap around a person. Those front legs were all wrong. Too long, all out of proportion, made it look even stranger. Its back looked humped and sat higher than both its head and its rear. The waterline on its side sat about halfway up its ribs, same depth we were standing in, and even on all fours, it stood almost as tall as me. Tyler had also seen it by then. I could hear the change in his breathing and see the way he started to speed up toward me. I told him to come straight to me and not waste time staring at it. The animal made its first real push then. It came up out of the water onto a shallow patch and raised its front end, half upright again, with its weight over its hips. It took 2 long strides like that, splashing hard, aimed straight at the gap between the two of us. I didn't think. I shouldered the gun and fired. The first shot was rushed, and I knew it as soon as I squeezed. The pattern went high and right, shredding bark instead of hitting anything vital. I worked the pump and fired again, dropping the bead lower onto the center of its chest. This time I hit it. The fur at the front of its body puffed and flattened like someone had slapped a wet rug, and the whole front end bucked to the side as if a cable had snapped tight across its shoulders. You could see the impact travel down its frame. The ribs seemed to flex under the hit. A couple of pellets must have driven farther back, because it twisted its torso hard and let out a noise that felt like a physical hit across my chest, more than something I heard with my ears. A deep, low grunt that broke off into a short, ugly growl. It didn't go down. 3-inch steel number 2s are made for ducks, not for something built like that. Judging by how high the water sat on it, how thick the shoulders were, and how little the impact slowed it, I'd put it well over 300 pounds, maybe pushing 400. Instead of falling, it rolled with the hit, dropped back onto all fours, and angled away a few yards before slowing. At 25 yards, they still hurt it, but not quite enough. On a deer or hog, that kind of hit usually folds them up or at least knocks them off their feet. This thing just checked up and shifted its weight, like somebody had body-checked a loaded fridge. I saw dark wet spreading along its side, different from swamp water, and the muscles under the fur still working. That was the point where any idea of keeping things calm evaporated. I racked in another shell and threw a second load at it while it was still trying to regain its footing. That pattern spread higher and wider. I saw pellets strike along the side of its neck, and at least a few hit the lower part of its face. Its head snapped to the side, and it flinched back, pawing at its own muzzle for a second like a dog that stuck its nose into a hornet nest. That moment of pain and confusion was the only real opening we got. I used it. I yelled for Tyler to run for the trail and not look back. He started pushing water hard, almost into a wade run, legs churning and throwing spray. It's an ugly, inefficient way to move, but that's all you get in that kind of flooded timber. I backed after him, gun up, fingers numb on the forend. The animal did not break off yet. As soon as we turned, it started moving again, not directly behind us this time, but off to the side in a curve. It was trying to get around and push us in a direction, the same way a herding dog will work cattle. It would go up on 2 legs for a few steps when it needed a better look over logs or to find a clear lane, then drop to 4 again and pour on speed. Every time it rose up, I could see its true height. Standing straight, it had to be pushing 8 feet. It looked stranger every time I caught a glimpse, but I didn't have time to process it in that moment. We were fighting for our lives, that much I knew. The water seemed deeper on the way out than it had on the way in. We crashed through thin ice sheets I hadn't noticed earlier. Every time Tyler stumbled, my stomach dropped. If either of us went down and flooded a wader at that temperature, we'd be in serious trouble. Cold like that does not give many second chances. When the beast came into another opening, I fired a third time, mostly to slow it, rather than out of any real belief I was going to kill it. That shot went low, kicking up a sheet of water in front of its chest. It veered slightly, then pushed closer to our left, still keeping pace effortlessly. We eventually hit the slight rise where the bottom firmed and the water dropped from mid-thigh to just over our boots. The marked trail back to the parking area lay straight ahead, a wider gap between the trees with a lighter strip, where other hunters had stomped the ground flat coming in. The animal slowed when we started climbing. I could hear it behind us, sloshing and panting. When I risked a look back, I saw it standing more upright now in the deeper water, watching us. Its shoulders were rolled forward, one side lower than the other, where the pellets had taken hold. Blood darkened the fur along that side, different from the wet sheen everywhere else. We didn't stop. Once we were on the actual trail, we were moving on semi-solid ground, with puddles instead of fully flooded timber. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, heavy and numb. Tyler's breathing had turned into short, ragged pulls. We were both sweating inside our layers even though the air was below freezing. Beat 3. For a little while after that, nothing happened. We kept moving down the trail. The timber opened up just enough that I could see farther between the trees, but not so much that I could pick out every trunk. I checked over my shoulder every few seconds at first, then a little less as the yards piled up, and the only thing behind us was our own tracks and broken ice. My legs started to feel rubbery. The long push through the flooded timber and the spike of adrenaline were catching up with me. My hips ached from lifting my feet high through the water. My lower back throbbed from trying to stay balanced. Every breath felt thick and cold going in and heavy coming out. Tyler didn't look much better. His steps had lost that spring a 16-year-old usually has, and turned into the same tired plod I see on guys my age. We topped off our guns as we went. It's a habit I've had since my army days. Never walk with empty space in the magazine if you can help it. At one point, when the trail straightened out, and I could see a good stretch ahead and behind, I stopped just long enough to thumb a couple more shells into the tube. Tyler did the same with his 20. The shells felt clumsy in my gloves. I dropped one in the mud and left it there rather than wasting time bending down for it. The woods stayed quiet. No more splashing off to the sides. No more grunts or growls behind us. Just the usual small noises. A squirrel scolding somewhere out in the dry stuff. A bird winging out of a bush. The slap of water in low spots as our boots went through. After a few minutes of that, the whole thing started to feel almost unreal. Like maybe I'd worked myself up over a big feral hog or a trespasser in dark clothing. But the momentary peace and quiet gave me a false sense of security, and I almost paid the ultimate price for my complacency. We were maybe halfway back to the truck when it came at us again. The trail dipped slightly there and bent around a big blowdown on the left, a huge tree that had gone over at some point and left its root ball sticking up like a wall. The log itself lay parallel to the trail, just off to the side, big enough around that you couldn't see over it without climbing. I remember thinking it would be a good place for a deer to jump up from, if it got bumped. I never saw a glimpse of the damn thing while it circled us, but there's no other way it got to that spot before us. It must have swung way out into the drier timber while we were grinding our way along the low spots, then cut back in ahead of us and hunkered down behind that log, waiting for us to walk past. I didn't notice a thing. It came out of nowhere. 1 second, there was nothing but our own steps. The next, everything went to hell. A perfectly executed ambush. One that required more planning than any normal animal should be capable of. A damn smart bastard that thing was. I didn't even manage to turn my head. My boots were sunk in soft ground, and my whole body felt a step behind my brain. The instinct to bring the gun around never made it past my shoulders. Before my muscles started to react, the thing was already off the ground and coming over the log, or so I was told later. Tyler happened to be looking back at me right then. He told me later he'd been about to say something, to crack a stupid joke about that thing. Instead, he turned around at just the right moment to see it come over the log. From his angle, he got a perfect view. A heavy, dark bulk rising up and forward. Front limbs spread, head low, ears laid back, about to lunge. Tyler's shotgun was up long before I realized what was happening. He shouldered the 20 and fired right past me, the muzzle swinging so close I felt the air and the blast beside my right ear. For a split second, I was more aware of that barrel than of the thing bearing down on me. Then the world narrowed to the blast. My right ear rang, and my vision jumped for a second, like somebody had slapped both sides of my head at once. For a moment, I didn't see anything clearly, just a flash of muzzle, an explosion of movement, and then a dark blur and noise. My balance went sideways, and my brain went with it. I knew the shot had gone off too close, but I didn't yet understand what he'd actually fired at, or how close it had been behind me. All I could register right then was the blast, the shock, and the feeling that the ground had just dropped out from under my feet. The rest of it, the fact that the thing had been right on top of me when he pulled the trigger, only really landed later, after my head caught up. Tyler told me later that the pattern hit the creature nearly head-on. In the moment, all I really caught was a wall of movement and the blast beside my ear, but he said he saw a puff of lighter fur and spray blow off the front of it, right around the upper chest and lower face. Once he walked me through it afterward, I could piece that flash of motion together with what he'd seen, its head snapping sideways and up like somebody had swung a bat into its jaw. If that shot hadn't landed when it did, it would have plowed straight into me. That's not me being dramatic. That's what Tyler told me later, after we'd calmed down enough for him to walk me through it. According to him, the hit knocked it a half-step offline, and it let out a scream when it happened. He said it wasn't a normal howl or bark, just a raw, ripped-out sound that came out high and deep at the same time. I didn't hear any of that in the moment. My hearing was gone to a dull roar from the blast going off beside my head. I didn't really see it run off either. All I registered was a big dark mass missing me by inches, and then empty space again. The details about how it moved, how it sounded, and how close it came are all from him filling in the blanks for me afterward. He described that it hit the ground half on 2 feet, half on 4, one front limb flailing, where some pellets had caught it. Claws or nails tore up the mud inches from my boot as it rushed past. The smell of it, wet hide, blood, and something musky and sour that I remember. It washed over me in a wave the moment I recovered my senses. It never lost its speed. The shot changed its path and commitment, but not its momentum. It drove into the brush on the right side of the trail, crashing through saplings and low limbs. Tyler racked the action as it went and fired again at its back as it barreled away. He saw pellets hit wood and maybe flesh. It was hard to tell. He racked and sent a third shot after it, aiming at the dark shape between the trees. If any of those follow-up shots hit solid, the animal didn't show it. It never slowed, never stumbled the way it had when I caught it in the chest back in the water. It plowed through the brush and out toward the drier timber, breaking branches and throwing up dirt. Not like it stopped on a dime, more like it opened up the distance quickly and then angled away until it was completely out of sight. This whole time I just stood there, completely useless. I was alive, but not because I'd done anything right. I had my son and plain dumb luck to thank for that, and the more I replayed it in my head, the clearer it got that if he'd been a second slower or his aim had been an inch off, I wouldn't have walked out of those woods at all. We stood there like that for at least 2 minutes, Tyler with the shotgun up, waiting for it to come back out of the trees, me trying to pull myself together. Nothing moved. We didn't argue about what to do next. I finally managed to get my own gun up and start moving. Tyler took the lead. We pushed on toward the truck. Neither of us said much. Talking felt like it would make it more real somehow, and I think we were both working hard not to think too much at all. We just wanted to get the hell away from that thing. The last stretch of trail felt twice as long as it had that morning. My legs were jelly. Every muscle from my hips down felt half cramped. My lower back and shoulders still ached from the recoil and from fighting for balance. My hands shook every time I tried to flex them. Tyler kept glancing back over his shoulder every few steps, just like I had been doing earlier, not quite trusting me to cover the rear on my own. I can't really blame him. When we finally broke out of the trees and saw the truck sitting there, it didn't feel real at first. We climbed in without saying a word. I hit the locks, then did it again just to hear them click. My hands were still shaking when I got the keys in the ignition, but I could drive, and sitting still felt worse than moving. Tyler slid into the passenger seat with his shotgun, both hands still wrapped around the stock like he was afraid to let go. I put the truck in gear and got us out of there as steady and fast as I could manage, eyes on the road and not once looking back toward the timber. Beat 4. Aftermath. We didn't talk much on the way out. The heater was going full blast, but I still felt cold all the way into my bones. My hands had calmed down enough that I could keep the wheel straight, but every time we hit a bump, I could feel that little tremor still there. Tyler sat quietly in the passenger seat for the first few miles, shotgun across his knees. About halfway home, he finally broke the silence. He asked me what I thought it was. I said I didn't know and left it there. That answer didn't satisfy him. He said he figured it was a Dogman. I remember asking what the hell that was supposed to be. I'd heard of Bigfoot and maybe a handful of other campfire stories, but Dogman was a new one on me. He explained that people online called them that, a kind of werewolf, more or less. Only they weren't talking about movie monsters or guys turning under a full moon, just something that looked like what we saw. Big, upright, mostly wolf-looking but built like a man, and mean enough that most folks who ran into one didn't stick around long. He said in the States, they used Dogman more than werewolf for whatever reason. I told him it sounded like bullshit. I said people online will make up anything and swear it's true. He just stared at the windshield for a second, and then asked if I had a better explanation for what we'd just seen. I didn't. I kept my mouth shut after that. We did call it in once we'd settled down a little. I wasn't going to pretend nothing had happened, and then read about some kid getting dragged off in that same spot a week later. First, I called the conservation number I had for the local agent, left a message about a large, dangerous animal in the flooded timber at Mingo, and told them they needed to think hard about how they were sending people in there. I also called the sheriff's office and gave a shorter version of the story to the dispatcher. I didn't use words like dogman or werewolf. I just said we'd been attacked by something big and aggressive that shrugged off duck loads like it was nothing. We never heard anything back. No follow-up call, no news story, nothing about an area closure beyond the usual waterfowl notices. As far as I know, people kept waiting in there every morning like nothing had changed. Maybe the right people listened and wrote it off as a misidentified bear. Maybe they didn't want to deal with it. Either way, nobody ever came knocking on our door to ask more questions. Time has put a little distance between me and that morning, but it hasn't softened how I feel about my son. I'm proud of him. He kept his head when mine was gone, got that gun up, and pulled the trigger when it counted, knowing damn well I was standing right in front of him. That's not something you can teach. It's just in him. Tyler hadn't known it at the time, but that Christmas he found a long rifle case under the tree. Inside was a Springfield M1A rifle, chambered in .308. It was a lot of gun for an aspiring young hunter like him, but after watching him stand his ground in that flooded timber, I figured he'd earned it. And if we ever crossed paths with something like that Dogman again, I wanted him to be holding something that could actually make a difference.